Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. It was a sunny, clear, warm summer day. Elizabeth was walking home from her night shift and on her way decided to stop by the Mega Green Mall. They were promising decent discounts for discount card holders there today, so her mother asked Elizabeth to go shopping on the list. They did not live very well. There was nothing to luxuriate in on Elizabeth's salary and her mother's pension. There was not much to go around, so they had to economize. There he was, a giant, glowing with multicolored lights. Crowds of Elizabeth's children, the barkers, and the mind-boggling aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Elizabeth adored wandering around the mall like this, leisurely enjoying the shopping. She could go in and try on a dress or shoes she liked. So what, even if she did not buy them? But it was a great pleasure for her to turn around dressed up in front of the mirror in the dressing room. It was for Elizabeth a kind of going out in the world, especially since with her frantic schedule at the year she rarely got to go out at all. She looked for a delicate pale pink lipstick in the cosmetics department, couldn't resist buying it, and then enjoyed a cup of coffee, savoring every sip. That's it. It's been a good day. Now let's go grocery shopping, she decided, and went down to the lower floor of the supermarket. Standing in line at the checkout, our heroine witnessed an unpleasant conflict. A small, poorly dressed boy was trying to buy Cashier, buns, and pasta. But he was short of money, and not much at all. Mean, fat Cashier, instead of forgiving the kid this debt and punched the product stubbornly and began to shout like a madwoman. "Get out of here, you miserable beggar. No money, you cannot go wandering around magazining me." Security. The people stood there nonchalantly, with only a few people complaining why the line wasn't moving forward. The poor kid was scared out of his wits, dropped everything and wanted to run. But the cashier held him tightly by the sleeve, continuing to humiliate him. Elizabeth's heart squeezed from such injustice to this unfortunate child. She went over to him and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll pay for you." She held out the necessary sum to the cashier and said reproachfully, "God, how can you not be ashamed? You were only a penny short, and you shouted at the whole world. What a child! Scared to death." Someone in line objected. "He's a beggar. You can tell he's a beggar. You can't pity him. He often hangs around, looks around, and doesn't take anything. No more money. A bunch of negligent mothers have bred poverty, and he's only going to steal something." Elizabeth was stunned by such callousness and indifference. How could it be? What have we come to? Dirtying up a poor little boy who is only 6 years old. She paid for her goods and walked out of the Mega Green in a terrible mood. All the euphoria of shopping had disappeared. Suddenly, the little guy caught up with her. He looked her in the eye and said softly, "Auntie, thank you. You are kind and good, not like that rat at the cash register. Don't you think I'm not some homeless kid? I've got a house. Do you want to see it?" Elizabeth sincerely laughed and thought that really need to take the kid home because he looked like 6 years old no more, and he wanders alone in the capital. He could be run over by a car or something. She firmly took him by the hand. "My name is Aunt Elizabeth. And what is your name?" The boy glowed. "I'm Austin." "Great. So shall we go visit you?" "Yeah, let's go. I'm so sick and scared to be alone. But it's a long way, an hour or so." The boy said the exact address. It was indeed the outskirts of town. But how had the boy got there? Who had let him go alone? She decided not to walk, waited for the bus, and they drove together. On the way, the baby dozed off, and Elizabeth, looking out the window, began to go over her past, remembering her childhood and youth. Elizabeth's mother, Fiona, had been a midwife in a maternity hospital, a job she had dedicated her whole life to, and her father was a simple locksmith in a machine factory. Nothing special, just an average family. As a child, Elisaveta adored animals. Stray cats and puppies were always hanging around their doorway. She selflessly fed and treated them. Her parents, noticing her aptitude for medicine, gave her a children's doctor's kit for her birthday. How much happiness she had! The girl took everybody's temperature 100 times a day and made shots for fun. When she grew up, she decided to follow in her mother's footsteps and enrolled in medical school as a paramedic. The girl liked medicine so much that she easily passed all exams and successfully completed her practical training at a municipal hospital, secretly dreaming of going to medical school. Her parents, when they heard about it, were horrified and began to discourage her. "Daughter, what are you doing? Where the hell are we going to get that kind of money? You'll finish school. Get a job as a nurse, and you'll be fine. You know how much medical school pays. It's only for the rich." But Elizabeth was a stubborn and determined girl, just like her mother, so she didn't give up on her dream. She got a job at a private clinic, saved every penny, took extra shifts, fell off her feet, but within a year, she had saved up for admission. She applied for admission herself, and, lo and behold, she passed the competition at the first attempt. Her father started kissing and hugging her. "What a daughter, well done. I'm proud of you. Honestly, I didn't believe you could do it. Good girl. You'll go far with that kind of character. Now do not turn from the path. I'll tell everyone at work that my daughter, the future therapist, and you'll be treating me and my mother." So, 7 years of college flew by unnoticed, and there she was. Elizabeth became a physician. She got a job at the local hospital, doing everything with enthusiasm and zeal. She did not brush off the elderly patients, who many of her colleagues could not stand and considered annoying flies, but listened patiently to all the complaints, spelled out the treatment, and encouraged them about the upcoming treatment. At times, with some, she had to babysit, as with small children, literally forced to do some or other necessary procedures or to take medication. She would stay up late in the resident's room and examine each case carefully and thoroughly. If necessary, she read the medical literature or consulted with her professors. Therefore, Elizabeth was adored and practically worshipped by her patients. People said of her, "God's doctor," but one thing saddened the woman. From the very beginning of her career, she began to be pestered by the superintendent, John, an unpleasant and boorish man. He smirked carnivorously as soon as he saw her. Well, groomed, young, pretty, in her prime. At first, he complimented her with hints, and when he realized that Elizabeth did not respond to them, he moved on to more action. One day he called her into the office. Elizabeth went in, not suspecting anything. It happens all the time at work. Maybe there was a question. But the old womanizer locked the door, sharply pressed the fragile woman to the wall, and tried to pull up his robe, at the same time breathing heavily, and grunted, muttering, "Come on, chicken, do not break. Do not spoil your career. If we get along, I'll always and everywhere for you mountain. What's it worth to you? Don't say no, I'm retiring soon. You'll be head of therapy, I promise." It was unheard of. Elizabeth broke free and slapped him across the face. "The next time you let something like that happen, I'll complain to the Department of Medicine. You have a wife, children, grandchildren? And what are you doing? It's disgusting. John, I had a better opinion of you." And she ran out of the office in tears, fixing her medical cap that had slipped down to her side. She barely came to her senses in the bathroom, washing her face with cold water. Since then, the vindictive superintendent began to thoroughly spoil her life. In the eyes, he smiled sweetly and was extremely polite, as if nothing had happened. But he always deprived Elizabeth Bonus, finding a made-up one reason then another, often put her in the night shift and withdraw it on holidays and weekends. Colleagues felt sorry for the doctor and more than once lamented, "Wow, no. Oh, bastard." Pissed off at Elizabeth. Just does not give a damn. When is he going to retire? He never misses a skirt, the bastard. And now he's got a turnaround, so he's pissed off. In the end, after a year of such hard work and moral pressure, Elizabeth could not endure and transferred to the ambulance as a paramedic. She was, of course, received there with open arms. The work is not sugar, and not enough good specialists, and the salary is even lower than in the department. But the team is great. Now the woman just rested her soul. Everyone was a solid team, supporting and helping each other, and this is much more valuable than the high salary. But the constant stress. A week later, Daddy died unexpectedly. It was a big shock and grief for him and Mom. He had always been the true head of the family, solving every problem. He'd listen, he'd take care of it, he'd think of something, and now she and her mother were left all alone. My mother said to Elizabeth more than once, "Daughter, it's about time you got married. Papa has waited and couldn't wait to marry you. You're getting older, and you have only work on your mind. Maybe there's a good-looking doctor at the substation, or you could go to a cafe and have some fun. You're like a robot, work, home, work. Only talk about the patients and severe cases." Elizabeth would only shrug it off. "Oh, Mom, do not start. I'll make it yet. What do I hang a sign on his chest? I want to get married. You're ridiculous, by God. There's got to be something in there that's my happiness, but it's not ticking for some reason. I want real love like you and Daddy." The woman laughed. "Say two, as we have Daddy. Your father and I met at a dance and we almost got married right away. Earlier, it was not customary to hold round dances for a long time. You got married and then you got used to each other. Those were the times. But I was lucky your father wasn't a bad man. He never hurt me. He loved you so much. So I don't know if it's love or not. It's probably fate." In fact, Elizabeth, of course, deep down agreed with her mother and wanted a baby. She was almost 30. She often had the same dream. She was walking hand in hand with a tall man with a strong chin, and they were leading a boy by the hand. Everyone was laughing and discussing something. And it feels so good and easy on the soul. But for some reason, she was fatally unlucky. She once had a boyfriend, back in her college days, named Tom. The son of rich parents, a confident and carefree student. He liked Elizabeth a lot on the outside. She was handsome, good-looking, well-built and smart. They met for 4 months. The guy went back and forth on the bride, took her to the movies and concerts on weekends, and then suddenly invited her home. Elizabeth was terribly excited about this. She thought Tima wanted her to meet her parents, which meant that their relationship was serious. But the guy, as it turned out, had other things on his mind. He practically jumped on her from the doorstep and started trying to get her to have sex with him. He threw her on the bed and started to molest her. Elizabeth did not expect such a turnaround, so she strenuously resisted and screamed. She begged, "Tioma, stop it, don't. I do not want so." But he went crazy and shouted in her face, "Are you crazy? You came, you agreed, and now you don't want to? What did I agree to? I thought you were taking me to meet my parents. Stop it, Tom." But it's like the guy's got the devil in him. "Why are you breaking down? Will you stop playing hard to get? We've been dating for 4 months and you're still pushing me. Your sophomore classmate, Karen, jumped on me the first night? Or did you think that I would just take you to cafes and give you rings forever? You have to pay for everything." Elizabeth managed to wriggle out. She forcefully pushed the guy away. With trembling hands, took the ring from his finger and took all the money out of the wallet and threw it in his face. "That's it. I don't owe you anything anymore. I hate you, you bastard." She could barely open the door with her trembling hands and ran home in tears. She cried in the bathroom for a long time. She did not tell anyone anything. She kept everything to herself. Since then, Elizabeth was afraid of men and bypassed them, believing that they all need only one thing from women. And the incident with the manager at work only exacerbated her opinion. Therefore, as soon as one of her male colleagues tried to woo her or show signs of attention, she instinctively began to close and distant. It showed the traumatic experience of the first unsuccessful love relationships. And how to overcome this complex, Elizabeth did not know. From her memories was plucked out by the baby's voice. "Aunt Elizabeth, we're here. We're going out now. You can already see my house." She perked up and shook her head. The boy took her to the third floor of an old panel house, busily opened the front door with the key in a mature manner, and after a little fiddling with it, he commanded, "Dress, come in. Here I live." Elizabeth looked around. The interior was very humble. Old, faded from time and rotten wallpaper, a minimum of furniture. The strong smell of sweat and medicine wafted up her nose. She wondered where the boy's parents were. He couldn't live alone, could he? She tiptoed into the bedroom and saw that on the bed, covered with a pile of blankets in spite of the summer heat, a man was delirious. He was haggard and unshaven, all wet and unconscious. Elizabeth cried out, "Oh my God, Austin, is that your father?" The little boy nodded his head. "Yes, his name is Max. He's very sick, so I'm treating him. 2 days ago he told me what medicine and tea to bring, and now he sleeps all the time for some reason. And he doesn't wake up at all. I talk to him, but he doesn't say anything. So I thought maybe he was hungry. So I went to buy him some food, and myself too, because I'm so hungry. And I'm so scared he's not going to die." "Will he, Auntie?" Elizabeth quickly measured the temperature. It was above 40, and by the persistent specific cough she, as a therapist, immediately understood without any phonendoscope that the man had pneumonia, and in a very advanced form. Her first thought was, of course, to call an ambulance. But then she looked at Austin and thought, what am I going to tell them? After all, I am nobody. I do not know the name or the last name. The boy probably will be sent to an orphanage. What am I not a doctor? How many such patients have passed through my hands? I'll cure him myself, and then we'll see who and what. Do not leave the baby in harm's way. The woman brought a basin of cool water, wiped the man, and put a towel soaked in a vinegar solution on his forehead. Then sternly ordered the child, "All right, Austin, I'll run to the drugstore quickly. Stay with your father. Don't cover him, he's hot enough as it is. Just change the towel more often. Can you handle it?" He nodded his head. "Yes, I can do it." "Aunt Elizabeth, are you sure you won't leave me?" "You won't leave me for good, because I'm afraid of him alone." She stroked his head. "I swear, I'll be right there. Wait." Elizabeth spent half the advance and bought medicine, systems, syringes, and ran to Austin. On the way, she called her mother. "Mammy, here's the thing. I'm not coming home today. I probably won't be home tomorrow either. I have to help a patient out, and it's going to take a long time to tell him. A man's life is at stake. Besides, there's a little boy in there too. Excuse me, but I have to help." She only sighed. "Well, if you have to do it, you have to do it. You cannot fix it. Run already, eyeball it. Treat your patients. I'll be waiting for you. Just call me often so I don't worry." When Elizabeth ran to Austin's apartment, she expertly began her treatment. She gave hourly shots, antipyretics, and an IV. The woman forcibly poured a little warm tea with lemon into the patient's mouth. Along the way, she made Austin lunch, chicken soup and potatoes with meat. The boy was happy. He ate with great appetite. He actively helped, tried to peel the potatoes and wash the dishes. In the evening, Elizabeth made a bed for the baby in his room and said, "That's it, you go to bed, Austin. It's late. It's past the children's bedtime." He asked frightenedly, grabbing her dress. "Aunt Elizabeth and you will go away, won't you? What about us? What if Daddy gets worse at night?" She stroked his naughty red curls again and pinched his knobby nose. "Austin, I'm a doctor. A real one. And doctors don't abandon patients. Have you seen the cartoon about A-Bullet? So sleep, and do not worry. I'll stay with you until your daddy is well. Can I ask you where your mother is? Why doesn't she live with you? Maybe she needs to be called to tell you that your daddy is sick and you are here alone?" The little boy just shrugged his shoulders. I don't know either. I've never seen her. I've asked my dad 100 times. He just doesn't say anything, or he says it's somewhere over there and points up. I don't know where it is. And how to call there, I don't know. Elizabeth felt so sorry for the baby, to the point of tears. She, of course, understood that his mother was dead, but she didn't give it away and said quietly, "All right, Austin, good night. Sleep well." All night, Elizabeth sat by Max's bed, taking his temperature and changing compresses and wet sheets under him. And only in the morning, when the temperature had finally dropped to 37 degrees, she passed out right on the chair, curled up. She was awakened by the hoarse voice of a man. He was trying to say something quietly, whispering with lips cracked with sickness. Elizabeth came closer to him, leaned over, touched his head, and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Thank God you are awake. I will warm up some soup for you and try to eat a little bit. You need to get your strength back." But he suddenly grabbed her hand, cried, and babbled, "Alice, my darling, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's you. So I died in heaven too. Poor Austin, he's all alone out there on earth. Who will take care of him?" Elizabeth was surprised, held up her hand and shook her head. "Yes, still delirious. I'm not Alice, but Elizabeth, and you certainly do not know me. You are not dead. Austin is still asleep in his room. You'll need another sedative. It must be the high fever that's causing the strange reaction." The man turned his head, tears rolling down his unshaven cheeks. "I don't believe it. It cannot be. You're Alice, my wife, and she died 6 years ago. And if I can see you, I'm dead. What else could it be? Darling, let me hug you. How bad I was without you there. Why aren't you so gentle with me? Give me a hug, please." Elizabeth was even more surprised and again began to explain patiently, "No, I am Elizabeth, a general practitioner. Your son Austin met me yesterday by chance and brought me here. He wanted to help you but didn't know how. So I agreed to help you, but didn't know how. So I agreed to help you. I'll stay with him and I'll cure you too." She shouted, "Austin, I hear you're awake. Come here. Your daddy's awake." The little boy quickly rushed out of bed barefoot and ran to his father. He threw himself on his neck and cried from happiness, "Daddy, how good that you are alive. I was so scared. I thought you'd never wake up again. Would you like some tea? I'll heat it up in a jiffy." The man looked at his son in confusion. "Look at that. It really is Austin. What the hell is this? Have I lost my mind? I feel like a complete idiot." He shook his head and tried to get up abruptly. But immediately he fell on the bed and winced at the pain in his sternum. Elizabeth said sternly, "So, Max, do not be a hero here. You have pneumonia and you still treat at least 3 weeks, and it is definitely too early to get up. So listen to your doctor. Otherwise I'll call an ambulance and they'll take you to the ward." Max said quietly, "Don't call an ambulance. I don't want to go to the hospital, and I don't want to leave Austin with anyone. Thank you for taking care of me. But my God, you look just like my late wife, like a twin sister. There's a portrait of her on top of the cupboard. I wanted to show it to you, so you wouldn't think I was crazy. Take a look for yourself, or else you'll really think I'm out of my mind. I agree to be cured and eat soup. Don't worry, as soon as I'm back on my feet, I'll earn money and pay you back every penny. I understand how you spent." From the experience, the man's temperature began to creep up again, and he began to suffocate, cough heavily. So Elizabeth forbade him to talk much, made him eat a little, made an injection, put an IV, and told to sleep. He did fall asleep instantly, for he was still too weak. And Elizabeth took out the portrait and gasped. It was really her, only without the bangs and in different clothes. But the rest was identical, indistinguishable. The woman wondered, How is that even possible? Again and again she stared at the portrait and at herself in the mirror and saw the same face. Austin quietly walked over, looked at the portrait, at Elizabeth, and said, "You are the one, Aunt Elizabeth." "That's you, Aunt Elizabeth? Though Daddy always said it was my mother who was up there somewhere. So you are my mother, and you came down from up there. Like a fairy, huh? Wow, I thought that only happened in the movies." Elizabeth hugged the baby and said, "Oh, Austin, I do not understand it. And myself honestly, but your mother really is much like me. Well, let's go and give you a bath. And look how grimy and in the apartment to clean up. Since I'm temporarily your mother, and your daddy will get better, then we'll see who's mom and who isn't." Together they worked amicably, cleaned up, and Elizabeth tidied up the child, gave her a bath, cut her hair, and found her clean clothes. Then they had fun making dumplings with potatoes, and at the same time taking care of Matt. At work, Elizabeth took a week off and devoted all that time to Max and Austin. Surprisingly, in their modest apartment, she felt as easy and comfortable as at home. The little boy was very well, mannered and mature beyond his years. In the evenings, they drew together with paints and felt-tip pens, and then she told him stories, making up an intricate plot as she went along. Max was getting better every day. He was slowly getting up, though he was still breathing heavily and wheezing. The man was typing for Elizabeth and Austin, and tears were coming to his eyes. For the life of him, it seemed to him that this was reincarnation and Alice was with them now. And they were like before, a tight and friendly family. It was so strange and incomprehensible. He felt like he was in a dream, that there was no way this could all be real. And how Austin had changed this week. He had changed from the quiet, shy, and withdrawn boogeyman to the jovial and jabbering type. Happiness jumped in his naive eyes. He did not one step away from Elizabeth and followed her literally on her heels. It was felt that he was finally getting the attention and feminine, maternal warmth with care, which he had lacked all these years. The week flew by like a day, and Elizabeth had to go to a shift. Max was still weak, of course, but he could already handle Austin for 24 hours without her. She sat down by his bedside and began a conversation. "Max, I have to work tomorrow, and I have to get home too because my mom's alone there. So I'll go soon, but after my shift, I'll come straight to you. When I'm in the neighborhood, I'll stop by and give you your shots. Tell me about yourself, about your dead wife. How did it happen that she died?" The man sighed and began his story. "I grew up in a dysfunctional family, my parents, if you can call them that, drank heavily. I was often hungry and was always hanging out on the streets. I can still see my mother's distorted face, swollen from alcohol, and her cries, and the thick army belt of my stepfather, a drunken freak from whom I often got a beating. I used to walk around bruised for weeks at a time. It was lucky that the janitor, Grandma Guinea, often took pity on me and fed me. She was the one who forced me to study, not to skip classes, scolded me when I started smoking, and for the first time I was drunk out of my mind, got me into a construction college after school. Otherwise, I would have disappeared a long time ago. I would have gone to jail or worse. I met Alice at the technical school. I immediately spotted her. I saw that the girl was always sad, sitting on the bench, reading a book and not in a hurry to go home, just like me. So I tried to buy her a chocolate bar, or ice cream, or a cake with jam. That's how we became friends. Her situation was no better either. Her mother died before she was 10. She was a very promiscuous girl. She didn't remember much, and she was raised by her old grandmother, who didn't like her much. She was always punishing her for a piece of bread, but she died when we were already married. I fell in love with Alice as soon as I saw her. It made my heart beat faster and took my breath away. Her hair was so beautiful, golden and thick, just like yours. and her eyes were so kind and a little sad, and she looked at me for a long time. She could not believe that I was serious about it. Not much of a fiancé. I got a job at the factory after technical school. I was given this apartment. I worked like an ox, took shifts and overtime just to provide for my family. Alice was a house painter. She also earned good money. She was very tired, though. It was a hard job. You wouldn't believe it. We never even had a serious fight. She would break down if I drank a couple of pints of ale with the guys after work on payday. But in the morning, she warms up breakfast and wonders if I have a headache. We really wanted kids, of course. How else could it be? But we had no luck. One miscarriage, then another. The doctors forbade us to get pregnant. They said we should take a break, but it so happened that we became pregnant again almost immediately. So Alice was suffering, walking hard. Her stomach was hurting all the time, and her work was not easy. She had to work all day long, and then, at 7 months old, she started bleeding heavily at night. I was so scared I took her to the hospital in a cab. All night long I prayed, cried, begged that she would just live. But the next morning I got the terrible news. There was a premature delivery and my wife died from bleeding. They could not stop it. The baby was hanging by a thread too. No one gave a chance it would survive. Too small and premature. Wasn't even breathing on his own. I thought I was going crazy with grief. I couldn't believe the reality of what was happening. Then the funeral, the wake, and the dreadful, crushing loneliness and sadness. I was in that apartment like an animal in a cage, howling and pounding the walls with my fists. Austin spent 2 months in the department for premature babies. I visited him, took him in my arms, this tiny red lump, which did not look like a normal baby, and sinful business sometimes thought, and whether he was worth the life of my Alice. But the answer did not find. Thank God my son survived and grew stronger, despite the prognosis of the doctors, and he was finally discharged home. And then the survival test began. None of my friends believed that I would be able to raise my son alone. Some even advised putting him in an orphanage. But I was totally against it. I myself actually had no childhood, so I swore to myself that I would smash my head in, put my son on his feet. At first it was unbearably difficult, but I learned how to swaddle, bathe, and feed him. I took maternity leave as a single father, then started working 24-hour shifts, asking neighbors and acquaintances to watch over me. That's how I made it. Everything went wrong about 3 months ago. I got downsized and lost my job, but I had to survive, and I couldn't leave Austin alone for long. So I got a job as a janitor in the neighborhood. I got a job done before noon, and then I was free. The pay, of course, is tiny, but I have time to take Austin from kindergarten and pick him up. And a couple weeks ago, I was in a heavy downpour, soaking wet. So I got sick. I thought it was just a cold, and I tried to take something myself, but it just kept getting worse and worse. I was afraid to call an ambulance. No one to leave Austin with. I don't remember anything else. I must have blacked out. That's the way it is. Thank you, Elizabeth, for responding to someone else's distress and saving me. And looked after my son. Few people these days are not indifferent, Elizabeths like you. Honestly, I do not want you to go away. It makes me want to cry. And Austin has been so different this week. He's just glowing with happiness. So our house is always open for you. You're always welcome for you. You're always welcome. You are what you might call our guardian angel now, Elizabeth said quietly. You know, Max, I don't know what's going on with me. It seems to know almost nothing, and it feels like I've always lived here, you know? Just everything is familiar, so easy and cozy. I feel like I've known you for years, and Austin's been like family since the first minute. How could it be? And most of all, I can't understand how there can be such a resemblance to your wife. It's like we're twins. But I certainly don't have any brothers or sisters. I'm the only child in the family. I have to have a serious talk with my mother. Can I take a picture of Alice? I'll show it to my mom. Max said, there's an album in the closet over there. Take any picture of Alice. We often took pictures. It was my hobby once. Elizabeth opened the album and was stunned. Incredibly, in every picture she saw herself. She had the same smile, the same eyes, and even a mole under her right eye. She chose one photo close up and slipped it into her bag. Then she went to say goodbye to Austin. Well, Austin, I have to work tomorrow. You're in charge. You're in charge. You're in charge. You're in charge. All right, there's soup and Navy macaroni in the fridge. You can heat it up in the morning. The boy suddenly became serious and sad and quietly asked, looking into her eyes, You're going away forever, aren't you? Tell me honestly, what about us? Everything turned over inside Elizabeth, and a wave of tenderness and pity rolled through her body. She clutched the boy to her and quietly promised, What are you, silly? As soon as I finish work. Come right to you. Honestly, Doctor? Is it a bargain? Austin glowed and replied, That's a deal. I'll miss you, Aunt Elizabeth. And he hugged her tightly in his warm, childlike arms while she swallowed the lump that came to her throat. Elizabeth drove home and got ready for a serious talk with her mother. And in her own mind was going on. She was amazed at herself. Until a week ago, she had known neither Austin nor Max and lived the most ordinary and boring life. And now they were the most necessary and important people in her life, and she couldn't imagine what she would do without them. When she thought of Max, she immediately felt a wave of love and tenderness, mixed with pity and compassion for the man who had been so cruelly treated by fate. Her mother was delighted at her daughter's arrival and began to grumble in the old man's way. God, at last I have come home to you. Well, where have you been? This has never happened before. I was worried. I'm exhausted. Who is this important patient you've been treating for a week? Elizabeth hugged her mother and kissed her on the cheek. Well, don't grumble. You better sit down. I have a serious talk to you. In the apartment where I treated a patient, I found this portrait. Take a look. It looks just like me. The same face and even a mole under the right eye. What do you mean? Mom, tell me the truth. It's obvious that there are no such coincidences. And this woman from the picture apparently has something to do with me. Pensioner immediately went pale and grabbed her heart. She took a shot of Valacordon and drank it in one gulp. Then she was quiet for a while and began to tell this long and confusing story. You see, my daughter, your father, and I couldn't have a baby. I never told anyone, but I had a terrible sin when I was young. I thought Neil was really in love with me, and I imagined an unearthly love to the grave. Anyway, I got pregnant on the first time, as if it were a sin. He found out, was furious, and sent me to a clandestine abortion, saying he does not need children now. That's where I was maimed. I suffered for a long time afterwards. I even wanted to do something with myself. My health was shaken badly. It was so nauseating. I never told anyone about it. And then I met your father at the dance. He fell in love with me immediately and sent matchmakers. We soon got married. We started living as a family. I couldn't get pregnant, and I was afraid to tell my husband the truth. I thought he'd leave me at once. Who would want me later? Well, I was on shift that night. They brought in a snot-nosed girl. She wasn't 18 yet. Her family was dysfunctional. Her stepfather and mother had been drinking. She was poorly dressed, not well groomed. She didn't even know who she was pregnant with. And she had twins, too. She gave birth surprisingly quickly and without complications to girls, twins. But she flatly refused to take them in her arms. And she was not happy about it. She wanted to keep them both in the maternity hospital. She said, I can't afford two. And as they do not have money, and if I come home with two and will chase away at all. And then a crazy thought occurred to me. I said to her, give me one child, and you easier, and I am happy, and the kids won't be orphaned. She didn't mind at all. She was even happy that it was one less burden. And the staff helped me. They made all the arrangement quietly. I adopted you. But I was afraid that your father would not accept you. And anyway, I did not consult with him. He scolded me at first, frowned, did not speak to me for a week, and then reluctantly took you in his arms. Long carried you, looked, thought, and said, "We'll name her Elizabeth. She will be mine, understand? And don't say a word to anyone." Well, my dear, you've got a daddy and a mommy now. We won't get lost. Daddy won't let anyone hurt you, remember? Since then, he's loved you like his own, and so have I. You're our little girl after all. You're the closest thing I've got to family. Forgive me, Elizabeth, for keeping the truth from you. Do not be angry with us. Elizabeth was in utter shock. So much was thrust upon her at once during this difficult week. It was unbelievable. She didn't know how to react, or what to do with her life. Her brain was exploding. It was like everything had been decided for her. Deprived of her mother and her own sister, and nothing about it told her. Elizabeth whispered, "God, Mommy, how am I supposed to make sense of all this now? I treated a man, Max, whose dead wife turns out to be my twin sister, whom I never saw in my lifetime. And his son, that's my nephew, Austin. He thinks I'm his mother. What a mess you've made of things. How am I supposed to act around him now? How am I supposed to explain to my kid that I'm not a mom? Why didn't you tell me this before, when Alice was still alive? We could have been friends with her. We could have talked to her. She's my sister. Oh, you. I don't know how to live with all this. Honestly, I need to sort myself out. I'm sorry, I'm going to go to my room." Fiona cried all night, terribly worried. That's it. Now Elizabeth will blame me for everything and never forgive me. What am I going to do without her? We wouldn't be able to sit in the kitchen like we used to. We wouldn't be able to sit in the kitchen like we used to. We wouldn't be able to talk privately anymore. Maybe I really should have told her everything sooner. But how? For 24 hours, driving around with the brigade on calls, Elizabeth couldn't get it all out of her head. She didn't know what else to do. She was magnetically drawn to Max, and she missed Austin like crazy. But it was so messed up. Raising her nephew and calling him son. To love a man for whom you would be an eternal copy of his dead wife. Call another man's woman mother all your life and forgive her everything. Never see your own sister but take her place in someone else's family after her death. My head was boiling with these thoughts. Their chauffeur, Sean, was a good friend of Elizabeth's. They often talked heart to heart. Shared their burdens. The older man immediately noticed that there was something wrong with the paramedic. When, after the shift, he saw sad Elizabeth, sitting with a bag on the bench near the substation, he timidly approached her. "Elizabeth, may I sit next to her? Am I disturbing you? Why are you so gloomy?" The woman sighed and gestured for the old friend to sit down. "Oh, Sean, you won't believe it. I'm sitting here like in that fairy tale about 3 roads, and I don't know which one to choose. I can't get my head around this. My whole life's a mess. Half of your life passes, and suddenly it turns out that it wasn't your life at all, but some other person's life that was foisted on you." The elderly man said quietly, "Will you share? Maybe I'll tell you something in an old man's way. And it would just be easier. If you do not want to tell, I understand. It's a private matter." Elizabeth sadly told him about all his news and adventures. Then she added, "What are we going to do now? I don't know what to do. How to go on living. Call a stranger a mother as before. Tell my nephew that he was my son. And how do I explain all this to Max?" Sean objected. "I'll tell you this, Elizabeth. It's not an easy situation you're in. You might as well make a movie. If you don't know what the right thing to do is, do what your heart tells you to do right now. It won't cheat. Where do you want to go right now? To Max's or to your mother's house?" Elizabeth nodded her head in agreement. "To Max's. And Austin's. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about them. Chauffeur said, so go. Tell him the whole story, straight to the point. Lying, even if it's to the rescue, always comes back to haunt you. You must not be afraid of anything. Not look at others, not worry about what people think, and just live. And then time will tell you what's what. And don't hold it against your mother. No matter how you look at it, she raised you with dignity. You see what a great doctor she turned out. As for mistakes, they all happen. They are a thing of the past. We do not judge parents. We don't know where you would have grown up if not for your foster mother, maybe in an orphanage. Your own mother, you said yourself, couldn't bring up your sister properly either. So everything is for the best. Elizabeth smiled and shook her colleague's hand. Thank you, Sin. You're ahead. That made me feel better. All right, I'm out of here. Austin must be waiting for me. I told him I'd be right back. Elizabeth took the bus to Max's house, buying fruit and candy on the way and a big, beautiful backpack for Austin. After all, he had to go to school this fall, so it would come in handy. As soon as she rang the doorbell, Austin rushed to her neck with a shriek of happiness. He hugged her so tightly and whispered, "Hooray! You came after all. You did not cheat. Come on, I'll feed you. Daddy and I fried potatoes and mushroom." Elizabeth was horrified. What potatoes? It's too early for him to get up. He's very weak. I didn't let him get up, did I? Frightened little boy made round eyes. Oh, we'll be quiet. I think I blabbed. Don't tell your daddy. Max lay in bed like a model patient and smiled. I did everything you told me to do. I took pills. I inhaled. I gargled my throat with mixtures. And I missed you very much, honestly. How are you? How tired are you? Did you find out from my mother the secret of his resemblance to Alice? Elizabeth exhaled and replied, I'll tell you now, so stunned. I do not know how you're going to take it, and Austin too. I'm still in shock. Max stood up. So, it's a big deal. Son, go take out the trash. We're going to eat now. As soon as the front door slammed shut, the woman continued, It turns out that I and your late wife Alice, twin sisters. My mother gave birth to us and wanted to leave us because she was from a dysfunctional family. But my foster mother, who worked as a midwife there and was childless, persuaded her to give me to her and to take the other girl away, as it was easier with one child. That was the secret. That's awful. I had a sibling my whole life and I didn't know it. We could be friends, talk to each other, help each other. It just doesn't make any sense. So Austin's not a stranger to me. He's my own nephew. That's right. You know, that's probably why I couldn't walk past him at the supermarket. I felt like I was in over my head. And here at your house, it's like I've already been there. I guess that makes me feel for you, too. I mean, they say there's a strong karmic connection between twins, even if they're not together. I don't know, Max. What should I do next? I'm confused, to tell you the truth. Everything like a snowball's head. The man smiled even wider. What to do what? Marry me. It's clear enough. I am true. The groom is frail. But when I finally recover, find a normal job, and we will live together as a family. Austin will be happy too, I'm sure of it. He's crazy about you. So think about it, I'm not kidding. Elizabeth was stunned by the proposal. That, and the proposal of marriage, she certainly did not expect. But she was confused by one question. Max, but you'll always compare me mentally with Alice, right? I'm just a copy of her to you. And you're not really me. You love her. Only in my face. And I need you to love me, you know. Let's just be friends for now. I can live with you. Be with Austin. I'm really very fond of him. Especially since he's my nephew. And then we'll see. Okay? Max was sad and apparently very upset. But he said aloud, So be it. I will accept any decision you make. I'm happy that you're with us now anyway. So, are you going to try our potatoes? It's getting cold. The three of them ate dinner, laughed, then drank tea and cake, and Austin strutted proudly around the apartment with the backpack he had given them, stuffing it full of children's books and trying on his role as a schoolboy. The next day was a day off, and Elizabeth in the morning told Max, "I need to see my mother and ask her forgiveness." I then said too much in the heat of the moment. I can imagine how she's worried now. Can I take Sasha with me? The baby has to meet his grandmother, right? Everyone else has a grandmother, but Austin doesn't. It's not right. And when you get better, we'll all go see her together, or we'll invite you over here for a visit, okay? Austin was thrilled. Yay! We're going to visit. What's Grandma's name? How old is she? Can she bake pies? Vladik, my friend's grandmother, bakes such tasty pies. They're delicious. 1,000 questions came up from the boy. When Elizabeth and Austin entered the house, Fiona immediately guessed who it was. Because Austin looked a little like Elizabeth, you could even think he was her son. The woman was delighted and murmured, "Oh, who's here to see us? Hello, little man. What's your name?" The little boy answered business, like, "I am Austin, your grandson." That's what my mother Elizabeth said. "So you're my grandmother now." "The real one?" The woman laughed, unable to help herself. "Of course I am. My grandmother's name is Anna." "Well, why are we standing on the doorstep? Let's go to the kitchen. I'll treat you. I've got fresh cutlets and sugar buns, fresh from the heat." The little one ate from the heart and sat down to watch his favorite cartoon about Smurfs. Elizabeth took her mother's hand and said softly, "Forgive me, Mom, that I was so abrupt to answer you. It was me in the heat of the moment, not thinking. Then I reconsidered everything. And I want to thank you for raising me with my father, for loving me. I felt it. Of course, I wish I'd had a chance to talk to Alice, but I guess that was my fate. But now I have a nephew, Austin. I'm so fond of him. He's so wonderful. He just thinks I'm his mom, and I don't know how to tell him otherwise. Also, Max proposed to me, and I said no. But I'm going to live with them. I'm so confused, Mummy. Fiona asked me a question that she didn't understand. What do you mean? I don't understand. And how are you going to live with a man? Bring up his child as what? You better decide for yourself, daughter, or you're a complete family, or then give it up while it's not too late. Do not traumatize the child's psyche. You can't do that. He's not an Iron Man. He can't stand it for long. You don't like Max. You don't like Max. Do you dislike him? If so, I understand. You can't force yourself. Elizabeth shook her head. Mom, I'm confused. I love him, and I care for him, and I love Austin. But I'm worried that Max sees me as just a copy of his dead wife, Alice, and he loves her, not me, you know. And what about me, you know? And what about me? I want to be loved by my soul and not someone else in my face. The wife sighed heavily and replied, You know, daughter, it's hard for me to give you advice. I've made a lot of mistakes myself. I can tell you one thing, when I married your father, I probably, if I put my hand on my heart, did not love him. But I knew in my feminine intuition that he loved me and would never let me down. You won't be lost with him. And I have never regretted that choice. Your father did the best he could for his family, respected, valued, and loved me all his life, no matter what. Other men leave their children behind no matter what. Your daddy loved you like you were his own, even more, and he never reproached me for being childless. And I fell in love with him later when I felt this attitude. Do you understand? So did Max. If he really loved his wife and brought up his son himself, then he'll carry you in his arms. I think so. At first he might mentally compare you to Alice, but then he'll see what you're really like and everything will work out between you. And then it's up to you. I'll support you anyway. They sat for a little while longer, and Elizabeth began to pack her things. Mother looked sad and quietly brushed away a tear. Elizabeth, noticing this, hugged her tightly. What about you, Mom? Will you be alone? Do you have high blood pressure and sugar? Do you want me not to go anywhere? But Fiona protested vehemently. You what? On the contrary, I'm happy that you're getting married. You finally have your own family, and I'll get used to it. I'll be expecting you on weekends. And baked pies to Austin's order. The family hugged and cried, still both feeling a little sad about parting. They arrived at Max's house, and Sashenka started babbling to him about his visit to Grandma Anna. The child's emotions were running high. Max saw Elizabeth's traveling suitcase in the hallway and kept waiting to ask. Finally, Austin was exhausted and fell asleep on the couch. Elizabeth carefully moved him, covered him with a plaid, and sat down next to Max on the bed. He asked with hope in his voice, Elizabeth, have you changed your mind? You're moving in with us. I'm so glad. The woman smiled and said, I agree. I'll marry you. You and Austin have become the closest thing I have to family these past couple of weeks. I couldn't live alone anymore, that's for sure. And then we'll see how it goes. I can't leave Austin like this. He trusted me, and I'm crazy about him. He calls me Mama. That's all right. Who cares if he's my son or my nephew? I care about you too, but it's more complicated than that. Just don't rush me, okay? Max jumped up and down on the couch. Thank you. I promise you won't regret anything. I'll be the best husband and father in the world. After all, now I have someone to live for, and so the three of them began to live together. Max finally recovered and got a new job, a foreman at a construction site, and Austin went to first grade. Elizabeth, like a real wife and hostess, took it upon herself to put their present family nest in order. She and Max repapered the wallpaper, changed the curtains, and repaired all the furniture. The woman took great pleasure in cooking delicious dinners, baking cakes, and feeding the whole family. From the outside, it was an exemplary family. The neighbors, however, at first when they saw Elizabeth, they crossed and spat over their left shoulders, thinking it was Alice's ghost. But gradually they got used to the fact that it was a completely different person. One thing saddened Max. He still slept with Elizabeth on separate couches, and intimacy never happened between them. He had promised not to push her, and she wasn't the first to go for intimacy. They were best friends, although when he casually touched her hand or embraced her, he could clearly feel that she was burning with desire. But for some reason carefully hides it. The man was exhausted. Maybe she doesn't like me, and she lives with us just because Austin was her nephew. I can't stand it that long. I'll go crazy to see the most desirable woman in the world every day and not be able to touch her. It's a hellish torment. Elizabeth herself understood that it couldn't go on like this forever. And to tell the truth, she wouldn't have minded if Max had persisted. But inside her there was like some kind of barrier. On the one hand, she was worried that Max loves not her but Alice. And on the other hand, the same sad experience of failed relationships, previously very much interfered. And then she was terribly embarrassed that she was already over 30, and she is still a virgin, and simply does not know how and what. One day they were invited to a party to see Seen Off for retirement. The celebration took place in a restaurant. Lots of Elizabethans gathered. Everyone was drinking, congratulating the retiree, dancing and relaxing. So Max went outside for a smoke with Scene. So one word after another, and tipsy Max couldn't stand it and let the old man know what was troubling him. So in a few words, he kept silent for a while, and then said, "You're silly, Max. Elizabeth loves you more than life. Do not be timid. Show the initiative. That's all she is waiting." Max hesitated. "I promise not to press her, but what if she takes offense?" Cian laughed. "Women always say that, but they're just waiting for a man to make the first move. Believe me, I know Elizabeth for many years." And Max made up his mind. Austin was at Anna's grandmother's sleepover that day. They entered the apartment, and Max kissed Elizabeth passionately, holding her to him. He was afraid that now she would push him away and become indignant, but to his surprise, The woman responded to the kiss and caving in his arms, allowing him to do everything. What a passionate night it had been. They were literally bathed in love and tenderness, whispering the most intimate phrases to each other. In the morning, Max, kissing the exhausted Elizabeth, whispered, "What fools we are. So much time wasted. I love you, Elizabeth. It is you, do not worry. You do not look like a character of Alice. Only an appearance, and I live with you and for you." Elizabeth just melted from such words and quietly replied, "And I love you, Max." Strongly and strongly. Soon the couple were married and they began to dream of having children together because Austin asked for a brother or sister. Let's wish them happiness because they both deserved it.